Welcome to The Work of Warriors, a podcast dedicated to bringing mental wellness to the entertainment industry. I'm your host, Kim Rapach. This podcast is dedicated to the artists we've lost to mental health, addiction, and suicide, and to those who are still suffering in silence. Since I started this podcast, I have been fortunate enough to build many meaningful friendships. The podcast starts with someone that I meet online, and we have a synergy and a connection, and we become friends. I met a friend that I interviewed on the podcast, Robin Arudi, that I ended up traveling with, and I just feel really, really lucky to have the opportunity to meet so many exciting, magical people. And sometimes I also have the pleasure of interviewing friends. Today's guest is an actor, a creative director, a film director, and really honestly, and an author, and honestly, just an all-around creative genius. He is kind, vulnerable, authentic, wise, insightful, funny, and you're going to love him. And I all week long have been looking forward to this interview. I'm so excited that I just get to sit in the company of just a dear friend who I admire and respect and look up to. I'm so excited to introduce to you Blaine Hogan. Hi, Blaine.
Hi, Kim.
Thanks for being here. Welcome to the Work of Warriors.
It's my pleasure. I must begin with an apology because you called me a long time ago and you were like, I have this idea. I want to do this podcast. And I think we're kind of like picking my brain a little bit. Like, do you think this is a good idea? And then you invited me to be your very first guest. And I was like, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think now this is your second season. Is that what you said? That's right. That's right. So, way to go.
Thank you for your support. I appreciate it.
And I'm so happy to finally be doing this. So it's amazing.
I trust the timing. And
sure.
I appreciate your support. And I did call you and ask you if it was a good idea. I remember the call. I want to just provide a space for artists to just be human beings, to be people, to not have to produce or perform. And I'm really, really passionate about just making a contribution to bringing mental wellness to the entertainment industry and ultimately eradicating celebrity suicide. And so just, having you in my back pocket was a gift to be able to bounce that off of you. And I trust the timing. And also, you know what, that was a year ago, more of a season where I can't do this by myself. Will you help me?
Mm-hmm.
And again, trusting the timing, I had to figure it out, and here we are, and it's going really well. And yeah, we're in season 2. And
that was my plan all along, to offer lots of help and then yank the rug out from under you and be like, do it yourself, and then not return text messages or phone calls in a timely manner. But it was all part of my master plan.
Well, I've already told our listeners you're a creative genius, so clearly you are
when did you tell them that?
Health genius too, right?
I must have missed that part of the introduction. That's very generous of you.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. I've met a lot of really great people, a lot of creative people who've, they've had their share of adversity and loss and seasons of darkness, if you will, and who have risen to bring hope and tell the rest of us you're not alone. And it's wonderful to meet all these people, but it's also fun when I get to sit in the room, quote unquote room, with someone that I know. And so I'm so excited that you're here. And whether we were doing this podcast or not, I'd be excited just to sit and have coffee.
Same.
So
it's a gift.
We go back, I was thinking about it, almost 10 years.
That's probably true. Yeah.
So we were part of the same church, and my son was acting, and I had sent you his resume, and he ended up in a big Christmas production, and it was so fun.
Yeah.
And we've just stayed in touch ever since, and, are friends with some of the same people, have had some similar experiences with, life and the church. And I think one of our biggest connections, though, Blaine, is our stories.
Hmm.
You and I have a lot of experience with, trauma in childhood and doing very similar work within ourselves, the same type of work, story work, trauma work, therapy, and, trying to build a life that's very different from where we came from, right?
Yep. Yep.
I think that's the strongest connection that I feel to you. Like
Mm,
today, this morning, honestly, the day was starting out a little rough. And as I was looking at my schedule, I was like, even if, like, there's just certain people in your life that you don't have to talk to all the time. And you don't even really have to say a lot about what's going on, but that they're doing life in a similar way. They
yep.
get life, the same way. They're taking intentional steps every day to protect their mental health. And it felt like such a gift today. And like I said, even as I say that right now, I just trust the timing. So
Totally. Yep. Well, and I do have to say, a very big connection point for me personally is that when I was still living in Chicago and you had a private therapy practice, you said, "Hey, I have this extra office space. Is this a place maybe that you would want to use? And maybe there's some collaboration opportunities there." I really did at that time need a place to go because I had left the church, my job there, and was looking to kind of figure out a new way of um, creating outside of that space. And I was working on this very, very beginnings of a book. And I started writing my book in that office on that desk that was an old wooden desk that I think you had salvaged from an elementary school art teacher. Is that right?
that's correct.
Yep. And so you'd filled that with all kinds of art supplies and stuff, and you were using it, and you'd use it for art therapy when you had kids, I think, often.
Yeah. And
Um,
I was doing art therapy online workshops.
that's right. And so the first sentences of my book were typed on that desk. And I just remember how grateful I was that I had this space to go to, but that it had been curated in such a sweet way for my own personality that I was like, oh, this could not be a better
Yeah.
place to be able to disappear into and go and work on this book. So thank you for
Yeah.
that time,
Oh my
which was
gosh. Such an honor.
feels so long ago.
It does. It does. Yeah. Can you say a little bit about your book? It's so powerful.
Thank you. Yes, the book is called Exit the Cave, Embracing a Life of Courage, Creativity, and Radical Imagination. And it's essentially my story of how I survived trauma and addiction. And the way in which I did that was by understanding a new definition of creativity. And so it kind of chronicles my life from being an actor to almost losing my life to sex addiction to experiencing a tremendous amount of success as an actor at simultaneously beginning to fall apart at the seams and needing to make a very dramatic change really to kind of save my life, which took me to a seminary in Seattle under the tutelage of a guy named Dan Allender. And it's really where I did my story work for the first time and really began to understand how my past was helping me to imagine a future and forcing me to live kind of stuck in a present that I couldn't figure out how to get out of. And it really just tells the story of that journey from acting to, of course, when your acting careers take off, when your acting career is about to take off, the most logical thing to do is to go to seminary for 2 years and then never return to acting again, but instead work at a megachurch for 10 years as their creative director, where that offers you the opportunity to go to a DIY film school, which is what I did. And then, as so often is the case with white evangelical megachurches that are celebrity driven, it fell apart. And I went into commercial directing and, have kind of found myself now into, doing mostly that. But the book is, that's sort of a travel log. But at its heart, it's me trying to tell my story in a way that might help others who have struggled with abuse, addiction, are artists or creatives, and are needing someone to go, how did you do it? Or how did you stay alive? And I'm not sure I answer that question very well, except that I was one of the lucky ones that has been able to stay alive. And I was just trying to tell my story in the hopes that it would give people hope or help people feel the freedom to tell their own story, which I think is the way out. And it's the way to staying alive truly as a creative person.
Yeah, absolutely. And when your acting career was taken off, when you were, achieving that level of success, and then even in the church you achieved success in that environment, right? You were very successful, you were very appreciated, well known, adored. How connected in those spaces, especially in the beginning, maybe at the church, but with your acting career, how connected to your story were you? Like the success is happening. Would you say you were running from it? You were attuned to it? You
I think I was not aware of how deeply my past was affecting my present. I don't think I realized entirely how much my abuse, which was sexual abuse at the hands of two older boys when I was growing up around the age of 10. The fact that my dad was an alcoholic and a sex addict, and my mom had lots of health issues. Growing up in that system, I don't think I realized in those moments when I was acting and acting out, um, how those things were connected. And I think that's why what happened happened. So as I was achieving success and going back and forth to New York and auditioning for Broadway producers and getting my side card on a TV show and working at the best theaters in Chicago and some would say the world, I, I was experiencing a level of anxiety and panic attacks that I'd never experienced before, the kind of ones that were taking me to the hospital because I was convinced I was dying. Um, and if some of your audience knows the book, The Body Keeps the Score, what was happening was my body had held all of this trauma and pain, and it was trying to use the coping mechanisms of addiction to numb that pain until the coping mechanisms no longer worked. The high that I was trying to get from my acting out was not sufficient enough to quell the anxiety within. And my body just wouldn't let me go. And thank God for that. And it was only then when I found myself outside of myself, when my body just was screaming at me, that then I started to very minimally connect the dots. And it was that led me to, what essentially was a 2-year recovery program, trying to understand my story and how did I get to where I was. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I would describe how connected I was.
yeah,
So my body knew, my body was super connected, but I had not put the pieces together
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, and again, I'm so grateful for how you communicated that. I mean, in the book, but also here. because I just think it's so common, and I want these conversations to happen because I think part of where we lose people is we're thinking, what's wrong with me? I
Mm,
can't get high enough. I can't win a big enough award. I can't perform on a big enough stage. What is
yep,
wrong with me?
yep, yep. Yeah, especially because it is like the hustle is real and you have to keep grinding and you have it's a numbers game and you have to be in the right place at the right time, and it's like the alchemy of how to make it work is so mysterious, and yet the goals can feel so defined in like, if I just get this, if I just get that show, if I just sell this script, if I just get discovered. And I think what was the gift for me was that even though it was like a moderate level of success, like it wasn't stardom, it wasn't big dollars, it wasn't, it was just like I had done what 98% of people who have a SAG card were not able to do in any given year, which was make a living just doing acting. But it was enough of a taste of it, to know that like that and also the other things I was trying to do to get high wasn't working anymore. And I look back at those experiences now and I'm so very grateful, because I was able to realize and get a picture of how the mountaintop wasn't going to cover it, and there was no mountaintop I could achieve that would ever make it go away. And so then you're faced with, well, I guess I just got to figure out then what's going on. But it's our daughter right now. She's 12 and she's in a musical. She's in Seussical, the musical.
I love it.
And she's a really great performer and has a really lovely voice. And the way that they do it is they have two casts, a red cast and a blue cast. And there was an additional show added, and they were trying to figure out, well, who's going to perform. And so they decided that the middle school director decided she was going to create a purple cast, and it was going to be on merit, and it was going to be on all these things. And so there's been a lot of stress over who's going to get chosen to be in the purple cast. The character well, ultimately she didn't get the she wasn't chosen for the purple cast, and there's a billion different reasons why. And she's just been feeling this anxiety and pressure, and we went away on a little vacation, so she wasn't at rehearsal, and so she'd been dreading going back, and we just were talking about how normal all of this is, like the anxiety, even though it's the thing you love more than anything, but the anxiety that you feel before you do the thing is almost debilitating, or trying to understand that you don't get that part. That means, as now a director on the other side of the table, I'm now able to go, oh my gosh, I the reasons why I don't cast someone are so many that have nothing to do with their talent. And in fact, now I'm getting into the habit, especially in callbacks, to explain that to every performer, even if it's 30 seconds. I say, the alchemy of how we'll make this decision is so bizarre. And I want you to know that however this lands, it has nothing to do with your talent and who you are as a human and as an artist. And realizing like, man, I wish I would have had that gift to know that from a director standpoint, someone told me that to remind me that that's true, to
Yeah.
not hold the power to myself. And I feel like I'm going all over the place.
No, and I'm grateful. I just want to say thank you for doing that. As a mother of an actor, you know, there was one incidence where Mac was really close to getting a role in a very popular, teen show, if you will. And last minute, almost to LA last minute, never mind, they changed everything. They don't want to see
Yep.
you anymore.
Right.
And you're trying to explain this to a 10-year-old, right?
Yeah,
And then you see the show, we saw the episode, and this kid was in a completely different profile.
sure.
But it gave us language for it really doesn't have anything to do with that. And if you love it, keep doing it. But
That's right.
I'm
That's right.
grateful that you as a director are doing that. And it's in alignment with that idea that, if I go back a little bit where we were talking about where people struggle, I think sometimes we're running from our story, wondering what's wrong with us. And if we can normalize the conversation that you are a human being living in a human world with a human experience, and if you also have significant trauma, it's you're going to fall right into that hustle and grind.
Yeah, that's right.
You
And,
keep busy and not having to look back.
totally. And I think the thing I would want to say about the normalization of it is particularly for someone who would see themselves as a creative person or as an artist. Your superpower is your sensitivity to, like, your antennas are up to be like, ooh, what's that feeling? Or how do I articulate this idea? And it will only magnify some of those things that make you continue to feel like you're an outsider and you're alone and you're not normal and you're wondering what's wrong with me. And the gift, or if I had one to give, it would be a reminder to say, that's the most, it's probably the worst thing that an artist could hear. It's like, that's the most normal thing. I'm sorry. It's so normal. It's boring. And
So
to embrace that you're just like the rest of us who are bizarre and weird theater kids who had issues with our families. And I mean, all of it, like, that's just so normal.
yeah,
It's just so normal.
yeah, yeah. And I think, I would love to hear you say just a little bit more, if someone maybe is struggling and, what's wrong with me, and they were sitting across from you and they were wondering like, what's the point? What would you say? What would you say to them?
Um, Say more when you say, what's the point?
Like, what's the point? Why keep going, whether it be in the career
Mm,
or, like you said, thank God you're still here. Not everybody's still here. We
yes.
lose so
Yep.
many artists to, mental health, to addiction, to suicide. And I think it has so much to do with that wrestle of having this, this inner brilliance, having this creativity, but also having this story that I don't particularly want to look at, and not knowing, like you said, not knowing that they were even connected,
Right.
just trying to numb the pain of that. And if someone was maybe in that space and looked at you and said, what's wrong with me? Why can't I figure this out?
The answer that is often given, and it's incredibly valid, is, we need you. We need you. Where I think that in some ways that falls short is, when you're trying to decide whether or not you should stay, you don't have a lot of self-confidence. So hearing that you're needed, I think sometimes feels like pressure.
Mhm.
And I think it sometimes feels like, no, who needs me? You know? And I think a different answer that have been thinking about recently is, you need you. Like, your gift to the world is hidden in your story. And the pain that you're feeling right now is like the beginning of the hero's journey to start stepping into unlocking the thing that you're truly to become. Like, that's where I'm kind of like, it's the most boring thing ever, because what's a good story? It's a character who wants something and overcomes an obstacle to get it. So, like, you are the story. And on the other side of that work is your best work, which is your life and the residual output of that. And so, then you can play it out and go like, well, then we need that. We need that story. We need you to do that work so that we can get the benefit of you having done that work. But again, I think sometimes that feels like an added pressure that someone who's debating whether or not they should stay here is probably unnecessarily harsh. And so I think that's what I would say is, your greatest gift to yourself, and the world is on the other side of the pain that you're feeling, and the pain is the beginning of the process. And so lean into it, and let's find a safe place for you to do that.
I love that. Thank you. I got chills when you were talking because I agree. We need you feels like pressure. And I can, speak to that personally as someone who my gift is to take care of people. And in my darkest days, it's like, I can't take care of one more person. I can't even take care of myself. And
Right.
so thank you for saying that. It's not a pressure of you have to take care of the rest of us. And, the whole idea in my definition of a warrior is someone who takes care of themselves first so that they can have a greater impact.
Yep.
However that may be, not necessarily in your career.
Yeah.
Might be in your family, changing generational trauma, how the impact you have when you go to the coffee shop. It all matters.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things, I think that's what truly saved my life, is because I had figured out the artistic output of art and creativity pretty well, but it wasn't changing my life. And then when I started to apply some of those principles to my actual life, I realized, and so those coffee shop conversations, like, that is art. That is creativity. Those new ways of being in the world, that's literally art. And I think that as I have embraced that more, one, it makes the losses feel much more manageable, because the fails are still horrifically hard and many and great. I'm pitching on things, I'm writing treatments, I'm sending scripts, I'm cold email calling, all of the things that you need to do to try and continue to make it as a creative professional. But when I realized that's not my only output for creativity, it changes the impact that those career things have, because I get to do that in every conversation with my wife. I get to imagine a different future for my family and my daughters. I get to do that in walking out the door. I get to do that in how I'll spend my time. And I feel like the holistic view of creativity that I feel like is probably what I'm trying to say in the book. And I don't know if I do a good job of that, but it is what I'm trying to say with my life. It's like, the portfolio is massive, and it's in lots of different facets. I mean, we're all multi-hyphenate artists if you begin to look at it that way, and that the creativity is so much more robust if you are willing to enter into some of those stories and pain points to listen.
Well, the book changed my life. I loved it. You're also very funny. So the way you tell some really hard stories is very creative.
Okay,
Um,
I'm
some,
glad it makes you laugh.
yeah, yeah. But it touched me. And again, I resonate so much with your story. But I was wondering, for people who have read or will read your book, can you just give a brief summary of where you are today? Because where you are today, as we were talking before we got on the call, like, it just, even from this side of the world, it feels so meant to be, and it feels so true, because I believe that when we are taking radically good care of ourselves in our personal lives, that's when the rest of the world opens up. Not that everything works out perfectly and there isn't adversity or challenge. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But it just starts to feel true.
So it's probably helpful to pick up the travelogue a little bit. I thought I was taking a 2-year hiatus by going to this school, and that turned into a forever hiatus from acting. And then I mentioned how I found myself at a mega church, and then the mega church fell apart. But the benefit of the creative work was I'd kind of put myself through a DIY film school, and pretty knew, like, oh, I want to write and direct. This is really what I want to do. I think this is my core. And when the church fell apart, it fell apart in such a massive way that 12 families, the people that we thought, even if we work at the church or even be like members of the church, these are our people for the next 30 years. 12 different families all left the state within about a year's time, because the explosion and fallout of what had happened at the church was so profound. And so for about a year, Margaret and my wife and our girls, we were like, what do we do? Do we uproot? Do we reroot? It was this kind of binary question. And I think what we began to feel is that we were needing to go on an adventure where we were going to I think what the and this is, I think, true in any big explosion that happens in your life, the pain is trying to tell you something. And what it told us was that maybe we had been following a script that we hadn't written, something that had been laid out for us, and we thought this was the path. But because the explosion was so great, and was it obliterated the path. At first you go like, well, where the fuck is the path? Like, what do we do now? And then you start to realize like, well, maybe that wasn't the path we were supposed to be on anyway, because it's no longer there. So you might as well imagine something different. And that was not, I say that flippantly, it was gut-wrenchingly difficult to begin to even imagine something different. But one of the best pieces of advice we got was from my best friend, Jared, who I actually talk about quite a bit in the book. He said, well, so why don't you just go try places on? I was like, well, how do you do that? Like, just sell your house and put all of your stuff in storage and go do rentals. Like, our kids need school, and we need to that's not, no one does that. Well, then COVID happened, and COVID, in all of its like exploding continually, the industry that we were in, like, how do you shoot, how do you do jobs? I was once all of our girls were in remote school, and I was directing Nike commercials from our bedroom closet. All of a sudden we were like, oh, well, maybe we can go try these places on, because everything had been made available to us. And so that's exactly what we did. We went to LA for a little bit. And we were like, okay, we kind of get a sense for what that is. Then we went to Nashville because it's a creative hub, and we thought that was going to maybe be a good fit. And it was lovely because my brother and his family were there, but it wasn't exactly who we were. And we knew Atlanta and New York were kind of the other two on the list. And I had done a lot of work in Atlanta, and we came to Atlanta and we never left. And now it feels like this is really where we're supposed to be. And I'll say very specifically, we live just south of the city in a little town called Fayetteville. In about maybe 10, 12 years ago, Pinewood Studios, which is a UK very famous studio, where Star Wars, Harry Potter, all these places, all these movies were shot. They wanted to create a US entity, and so they did that. And then they were like, well, we don't want to grow. There were lots of different reasons. And anyway, the name changed and got a new owner. And now it's called Trilith Studios, and it's the largest single film lot in North America. Everything from Disney and Marvel is being shot here. And that's where we live. We literally live in a little town that is across the street from the studios. And so I go on a run, and I see the next Marvel film slingshotting a car that's on fire, or I run into Harrison Ford at the pizza shop, or Shia LaBeouf and John Voight are running lines outside the bakery, or Francis Ford Coppola is shooting what will likely be his last film on the backlot, which is my neighborhood. And I just walk on set for 4 hours until they realize that I shouldn't be there. And
if anybody could blend in, I mean, you've got a few skills. You've got a few.
I did. I'll tell you what, my one gaffe, and I know not to do this. Adam Driver is starring in, it's called Megalopolis. It's Francis Ford Coppola's swan song. And my best friend Jared, his wife is obsessed with Adam Driver. And he was walking off set, and I took a photo, is what I did, like a real amateur. And the photo is of Adam Driver and his security person looking right at me, which the photo I quickly deleted and was kicked off set. That's what happened there.
Oh
Um,
my goodness.
but, we are, the town of Trilith is meant to be kind of like, you think of old timey, the Ford company. They would build a factory and then they build housing for their employees across the street. And that's kind of what is happening here, as Atlanta is becoming, kind of the new Hollywood and a really official hub for big
Right.
feature films, TV, and as well. And now we're sort of like in the heart of it. But what is different about it is that it cares deeply about the health, holistic health of the creative person. It is,
So much.
and a very tangible example of this is a sort of all addiction invitation group is held in the pool house. Like there's a little community pool in the pool house that's 100 feet from my front door. And we've got lots of people that we're handing out pamphlets to the studios,
Yeah.
trying to say, hey, you don't have to lose your life to find it. You could just pop over at lunch, and we have it timed so that we can start the meeting, and then if someone is only on their 30-minute lunch break because they're on a studio show, that they can pop over, do the meeting, and then be able to return back to the show that they're on. And so it in 2018, when I do a quick little backup, when everything exploded and we thought the world was over and nothing, what the path has been obliterated, and a year and a half later, COVID begins and our entire industry is thrown into utter turmoil. We couldn't have imagined this place even existed. And now, 5 years later, here we are, and it could not be more perfect. It is sort of like a miracle on display for us and for our family to be able to continue to do the creative work that we want to do in a very, very specific niche, but also to be a place where our family can thrive
Yeah.
is quite a gift. And I'll go back even further to 2005, which is almost 20 years now, when my internal explosion occurred. I mean, I get chills just saying that, because I didn't know if I was going to make it. I didn't know if I was going to make it, and here I am.
Yeah. And I
And
mean, I'm so glad you're here.
yeah,
And that's why we keep going, right?
it
Because
is.
you
And
cannot possibly imagine what's on the other side of that pain if you love yourself enough to get the care, to do the work, the inner work, to heal.
yeah,
You can't even imagine
well,
what's waiting
and
on the
and
other side.
yep, and I think the word also is that we love you, and we really, I know I'm gonna all art is hypocrisy, so we do need you.
Yeah.
And one of the things we say in our recovery group is, if you make it, we make it. And I think about that a lot. Even just I look around, I go, oh, that person's making it, or just making a different choice in an ever so slight way, gives me courage to be like, I can make it. And it is communal. Uh, and so I think about that a lot. And I guess that's maybe what I would want to end with, is just saying that, like, if you make it, we make it.
Yeah. That's right in alignment with when artists are well, everybody wins.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So one quick question before you go. You have art in your town.
Mm-hmm.
That is your family motto.
Yes.
Will you
Yeah.
share that with us before you go?
Yes. When the book released, I convinced the town and the person who was in charge of public art to commission an artist to create a mural of our family motto, which appears in the last chapter of the book, Exit the Cave. And it's very simple, and it's what we say to our daughters every single day. Um, be kind, have courage, fail, ask for help, and the most important, we'll say Hogan's, and then everyone says, do it afraid.
Mm,
Um, and that's probably the most important one to us, because I think I recognize that every time I go on set, I'm still scared. When I was acting, every time before I went on stage, I was so terrified. I was like, why do I do this? And then I would step on and step into it, and I would be like, oh, this is what I was made to do. And I think too often we tell people to be fearless, to have no fear. But I'm not sure that is a human experience. Certainly, sometimes we feel more brave than we feel afraid.
sure.
But I think more often we feel more afraid than we feel courageous. And what we say to our girls is, you can be scared, but you are also brave. And so the work is not to eradicate the fear. The work is to feel the fear and keep going.
Yeah. I love that.
So do it afraid.
I love that. I don't want to minimize, your kiddos' experiences. It's going to be hard to be human no matter who you are, and I don't want to minimize that, but also to know your story of you growing up and know their experience and how different that is and how hard you and
Mhm.
Margaret have worked
Mhm.
to end generational trauma. Like it literally changes the world. I'm so honored. Like I'm going to tear up. I'm
Mhm.
so honored to know you.
Mhm.
I'm
Oh,
grateful you're here.
oh, thank you. Thank you for being such a huge part of my story and why I am still here. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll chat soon.
All right, Kim. I love you.
I love you too. Thanks, Blaine.
You're welcome. Thank
Oh,
you.
I didn't even say, but I'll put it in the show notes. You have a website and a book, and people should be following you because you're just a really amazing human. So I'll put that in the notes.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks.
See you in Atlanta.
Yes, soon.
Yeah.